Previously on the MidFlight Crisis. Can't believe you found some Tamagotchis.
It's Scruffy, by the way. Escapade. Yeah, my granddaughter's on that ship. Why, certainly. We have it a court.
That record is an amazing find.
We could sell it for the gold.
Or we could keep it for the information it may contain.
All the best, CC.
CC? Who do we know that has the initials of CC?
Yes. The mid-1990s craze of digital pets. Best of luck in your mission to the Escapade.
We never told you the name of the ship.
Smoke bomb!
Final docking sequence with the Escapade now.
This is the Era Phoenix. We're Torpor Techs from Cryo Corp.
Another warm welcome for us.
Beyond excited to try this board and abandoned spaceship thing again.
Let me try something else. Nous sommes des techniciens de le Torpor de Cryo Corp.
I'm programmed to understand over 1,000 different languages spoken in the known systems.
I'm not sure that speaking French will help.
The ship said, "Welcome aboard."
Fine, I'll stay out of this.
Light years from the nearest way station, and the only ship we board is French-speaking only.
You really didn't read that pamphlet at the space timeshare meeting.
You act like you're surprised.
How is that possibly relevant?
Well, the Escapade is one of the transit ships for that company, and the services module is set for both English and French.
And you can translate?
Well, I took a few online classes on the way over. How's the air in here?
Breathable, but the temperature is awfully low for a passenger ship. Would make sense if this is a cold storage facility.
It certainly would. As an advanced processor system, I find the freezing cold the optimum temperature. This is almost pleasant.
Checking schematics. The crew's cryopods are separated from the rest of the passengers on the far end of the ship. Let's find Captain Case first.
Okay, let me check the power systems. Les lumières fonctionnent-elles?
Les lumières ne fonctionnent pas actuellement.
Lights aren't working.
Well, let's use these flashlights and continue onward. So we'll wake up Captain Case and take him to the bridge. Maybe he can help us find out why the ship has been floating in space for the better part of a week and a half.
This should be the doorway for the crew's cryopods. I'm going to work on the access keypad. It's locked.
I'm sure it's locked. It's a security door.
From the outside.
Strange. I wonder why they would lock the doors from the outside. Can we bypass the panel?
It'll take a minute, but yeah, we've done it once already, right? Can you shine your flashlight here on the panel for me?
Sure. Oh, look over there. It says in this red lettering, "Do not enter." There's red markings all over the doorway.
I think that's blood.
Correct. Appears to be blood from multiple people. Also, I detect pizza sauce.
You know, we should probably go. We can find other jobs. I'll just dust off my resume. There's so many opportunities out there for places to be. So much space in space. And
we have a job to do and a promise to keep. Let's just find the captain.
You're right. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for all of this.
There really isn't.
Ah!
Gasp.
Oh, hey, the lights are working now.
Oh, apologies. I didn't mean to startle you both. I'm Captain just in case. Are you the rescue team?
Rescue team? We're here to wake you and the crew up and restart the ship.
The ship's dead in space. We lost comms and navigation a few weeks ago. We've been adrift ever since. Care for a drink?
We're on the job. The last thing we need right now is...
What do you have in the back bar, Captain Case?
This number is a little bristly. I call it always transparent.
Oh, for the love of Libra, that's rocket fuel.
Here's a few bottles for you. Keeps me warm in this frozen place.
Can you take us to the bridge now?
Sure. Oh, of course. It's right this way. As long as there are no monsters out there, we should be fine. Just fine.
What exactly happened here?
The ship's computer woke the crew and me, so we assumed that we were soon approaching our destination. But there was a significant temperature drop in the cryopods. So as a precaution, we woke several of the passengers up to check their vitals. That's when the odd things started.
What kind of odd things?
The passengers were super cold to the touch, complaining of severe headaches and drifting into sort of a paranoia that something was out to get them. We told them everything was fine, and vital-wise, they appeared relatively normal.
But they obviously were not.
Correct. We kept them isolated from the other passengers, but it was too late. Whatever this was had spread throughout the passengers. As long as they stayed in cryosleep, they were okay apart from the cold. And if we had known what would eventually happen to those who woke up.
Captain Case?
Sorry. Headache. Haven't had much to eat these last few days. We've rationed the food and water, but our supplies are critically low. Thank goodness you guys came. Here we are, gentlemen. The bridge. I'm going to check the power systems over here.
He said he and the crew were woken up.
They were all in cryosleep.
This is obviously the cryovirus.
This sounds like the cryovirus. But you can only get those if you're in cryosleep for years. The company and the captain both said the ship had been afloat for only a week or so.
He's obviously infected. He's got a headache, and when he walked by us, I could feel this overwhelming coldness coming off him.
Also, where's the crew?
The silence is beautiful.
I'm sorry?
Isn't that what the AI on the last ship said?
The only silver lining in all this, peace and quiet.
Where's the rest of the crew, Captain Case?
They didn't listen to me. They wanted all of us to go back to sleep until help arrived. I told them it was a bad idea, a very bad idea.
This isn't good.
Definitely not good.
Those things on the ship, those aren't people anymore. I don't know what they are, but they're no longer human.
Captain Case, we need to get you back to your room for your safety.
That's funny. You sound exactly like the crew did.
I believe the captain has officially lost his chill.
You can't put me back there. Not with those things loose on the ship. You can't make me go back.
Put down the phaser. Let's talk about this.
He doesn't want to talk. Quick, behind that console.
I've got an idea. Give me your flashlight.
Here you go.
Thanks. Can you tell the computer to turn the lights off?
Sure. What's the plan?
I need you to run over to that far console and distract the captain after the lights go out. He's got an Arledian quill gun. It's an old model, prone to overheating. And these bottles that we got, highly flammable. If I can land one, we can take him out.
You're starting a fire on a ship. You know that, right?
I'm open to other suggestions right now.
All right. Hope this works. S'il vous plaît, éteignez la lumière.
I can't see anything.
We cut the lights, Captain Obvious.
Were you storing that fun in the cargo bay this whole time?
Hey, Captain, I made a cocktail for you. Fair warning, it's a little bristly.
S'il vous plaît, allume la lumière. Looks like he's gone.
He must have taken off down the hallway. You know, he was right. Look down the hallway, those creatures. They tore him apart. We gotta close this doorway. They're coming this way.
He doesn't have a panel. I can't close it.
I can. The name's Suport. Engineering works at your service.
This is Matthew Aonair and Charles Azimuth. I'm Aaron, AI for the Era Phoenix, the only rational thing keeping them alive in this cold, desolate region of space.
What are those things?
I call them Frosties. That's the end result of the virus. If you don't die from the cold, you turn into one of those.
How did you survive all this time? The crew's quarters were empty except for Captain Case.
Luckily, I was on the wake cycle when the virus hit, so I was unaffected. We had to quarantine the captain, but we didn't realize nearly everyone was already infected.
How have you gotten past those creatures?
The Frosties? Fairly easy. I retrofitted a spacesuit with a specialty covering, allowing myself access to the ship. It's an impermeable layer consisting of viscoelastic variable tarpaulin. I call it Velveeta for short.
Did anyone else survive?
Unfortunately, I'm the last one. We're going to have to wait until those Frosties disperse. That's the only way in and out of the bridge.
What's that around your neck?
Oh, this? I found it off one of the passengers. Looked pretty. You're judging.
We're not judging.
I'm judging a little.
Hey, they're not going to miss it.
My apologies, Your Highness.
We're in a galactic recession at the moment.
That item on your necklace, it looks awfully familiar. Charley, I think that's a serendibite.
Looks like it. Mind if we see it, Miss Port?
Sure. Would you hand me a spare bottle of that always transparent, then?
Yeah, but I gotta warn you, it's mostly...
Rocket fuel? Yeah. It keeps the cold off. So what's this serendibite thing supposed to do?
We'll show you.
Oh, like right now, we're still in danger, and you know what? Why not? Playing serendibite now.
Now, in November, come the longer evenings when folks drop in to play bridge or stop for a snack after the movies. So keep the refrigerator stocked with Kraft's famous cheese food, Velveeta, to spread or slice for swell toasted sandwiches. Velveeta's a natural for late evening snacks, you know, because it's digestible as milk itself. These days, you really ought to be buying rich golden Velveeta in the 2-pound size, so you'll have plenty for snacks and also to melt for economical meatless main dishes. Remember, smooth melting Velveeta helps supply the protein you expect from a main dish, but the price is low. Tomorrow, get Kraft's famous Velveeta.
And that's why the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland.
I always thought it was the Loch Ness Monster. Well, that makes sense. Oh, and we're back. Broadcasting from the pale blue dot we call Earth. We've got a great show for you today.
That's right, Charlie. Today we're talking about the healthcare crisis. Now, have you heard of the French writer and historian Voltaire?
Who hasn't?
Exactly. He said, the art of medicine consists of amusing the patient while nature cures the disease.
So what does that mean exactly?
I don't think really Voltaire believed in modern medicine.
It doesn't seem like he did.
But that's okay. We have it now.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't always. The first record of any kind of medical procedure, do you know what it was?
I'm assuming something that's lasted for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's been around since 5000 BC. They found it in France. It was dentistry records, some kind of accounting of working on the teeth. There was also a record in 4900 BC. The record's not complete, and we're not sure that it was actually about an amputation, which is what the record said. But it was pretty close. So they were pulling teeth and cutting off appendages, apparently, back in 5000 BC.
Oh, that must be worth a whole bunch today. You know how much that would be worth?
I know, an arm.
And a leg.
Yeah, okay. Oh, boy. All right. So now we've all heard of the Hippocratic Oath, right? Written in ancient Greece. It was around 4000 BC when that was written up. Everyone who has seen shows like Grey's Anatomy or Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange?
Yeah, you know, the weird doctor played by Hugh Laurie, walked with a cane. He was addicted to Vicodin. He liked solving puzzles.
You mean Dr. House?
Well, that's a silly name for a doctor.
Well, that's the running title for the show.
Huh. Oh, well. Anyway, yeah, that was the Hippocratic Oath that a lot of practice is based on, you know, do no harm to the patient and don't avoid doing something that will help them.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis on giving patients what they need. And Howard Zinn, an American historian and playwright, had this to say: give people what they need: food, medicine, clean air, pure water, trees and grass, pleasant homes to live in, some hours of work, hours of leisure. Don't ask for who deserves it. Every human being deserves it.
That's a very good sentiment. If everyone had what they needed, I think people would be a lot happier everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Now, medicine has been around for a long time. Not just the way that we have now. 3000 BC, Egypt began recording medical procedures. They were incredibly clean as a culture and had some of the lowest infection rates of any culture until the mid-20th century.
All the way back like 6,000 years ago, they were that clean. That's incredible.
So they didn't know about microbes or bacteria, but they did know that there is specific chemicals they could use as preservatives, and then that led to their mummification process, and that's why the bodies are so well preserved today.
Huh.
So although magic and incantations were used to treat disease, as, you know, potentially some of them are today.
Jim's sick. Somebody must have cast a spell on him.
I know, right? They do take a look at practical scientific approach to physical injury, even back then.
Oh, okay. Like splinting broken arms and legs, things like that, cleaning out the wounds.
They realized that a broken body can be fixed and that there's procedures that can be put in place to do so.
I bet that was fun to do without anesthesia.
Oh, man. If only. Now, prescriptions arose in Mesopotamia around 2000 BC, but there's no distinction between science and magic. So herbal remedies and magical formulas were prescribed in tandem. So,
I want to see that prescription pad. I bet it's awesome. I bet it's like a clay tablet with ash and chicken bones. And...
A couple of crushed up a leaf today, and then maybe an incantation, and you should be good to go.
Yeah, call me tomorrow.
Yeah. Now, the early Mesopotamians did practice prophylaxis in the spread of disease. They washed and even bandaged wounds with antiseptics, even though they didn't know what antiseptics were at the time. They even knew about mental illness, which is very progressive, although they believed that they were caused by deities at the time, and then there wasn't anything physiological wrong with the patient.
So Jim is crazy because of Zeus.
Yes.
Well, that he wasn't Mesopotamia. But anyway, you get the point.
And that perspective on mental health and wellness lasted up until the late 19th century.
Oh, yeah. That's when, we'll get to that later, the microscope was discovered or invented. Now, let's fast forward a little bit from the Mesopotamians to around 600 BC.
Fast forwarding now.
We'll edit that post. There is some dispute over the first physician in India, and my apologies on this pronunciation, Susruta, I believe. He is
spot on.
Yeah, probably. Probably not. He is considered the father of modern plastic surgery. He wrote down things about rhinoplasty, repairing torn earlobes, perineal lithotomy, which is not fun. That's tearing of for a childbearing mother. Cataract surgery, and several other excisions when he cut things out of patients. Now, he also mentioned curing the sick, protecting the healthy, and prolonging life.
So it seemed like an ultimate good.
Yeah, he was like the original vegan guy, I guess. Now, fairly simultaneously, there was an alternative medicine in India at the time, and again, my apologies, known as the Ayurveda. Ayurveda? How would you say that? Ayurveda? Oh, you're Googling it? Yeah. Now, this closely resembled humorism, which was the idea, you probably have heard about this in some form or fashion. 4 elements make up the body, and in balance, those elements lead to health. If one of those elements or one of those humors is unbalanced, then it leads to sickness. Ayurveda? Ayurveda. Okay. So it's Ayurveda. But he also talked about, or this medicine practice also talked about a physician should be an expert of 10 areas of medicine. Those included surgery, of course, herbal remedies, which is the preliminary for prescribing medications, but also kind of a well-rounded thing like horticulture, cooking, metallurgy, and manufacturing of sugar.
This was a time before people realized how bad diabetes was.
Yeah, probably.
Obviously.
They probably didn't have that much sugar, or at least not high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, not highly processed sugar that we have today. Well, because if you look at the dental records for people from hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, the teeth seem perfect.
Yeah.
And then you see the records for people living today, and like they're falling out like, bits of wood.
Yeah, everything we're eating is killing us in every way possible.
It's so delicious, though.
But these doctors, I think is a good idea. I mean, it would be pretty much impossible today to be a master of all of these, but to be that well-rounded, I think that was very forward-thinking of them. And then in China, in somewhere between 200 to 400 BC, going backwards, or I guess you would say 400 to 200 BC, China started writing down their accounts of medicine. Now, that is what we think of as Eastern medicine versus Western medicine, and for some reason, Western medicine got the name modern medicine. But China employed techniques such as massage, herbal remedies, and acupuncture until Western medicine, modern medicine, quote unquote, was introduced in around the 1800s. So they had a big span of Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine.
And it is interesting that physicians began their formal training around 1220 in Italy.
That late, huh?
Yeah, that late. So beforehand, all of the medical training was passed down from a small group of people via text or just by mouth.
Not cell phone texting.
Just by the word.
Just by written text.
Yeah, by written text.
That would be awesome. I'm going to text you everything I know about medicine.
Here's how to do a lap chole.
Doop.
Yep.
Doop.
The advent of the microscope in the 1800s greatly increased our understanding of disease as well, replacing the ancient theories of humorism or humoralism, of the different types of humors from Shakespearean time, black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, all that great stuff.
The 4 liquids in the body. That's all there are.
That's all there is. There isn't any more.
There's definitely nothing else.
Yeah. It's a perfect balance of these humors was known as eucrasia, and an imbalance of these humors at any point would cause disease. And then during Shakespearean times, there was emphasis on an imbalance of your humors. And even before that period of time, bloodletting was a standard practice in order to balance out your humors. But people didn't realize that if you bloodlet enough, the patient will bleed out and then the patient will die. So a lot of people, the cure was worse than the disease, if you think about it.
Yeah. They were just trying to be healthy, but they were killing themselves even worse than we are now.
Mm-hmm.
At least faster than we are now.
Yeah.
Now, an area where great advancements have come throughout history has been the military. It's kind of a dark tale to tell, but military advancements have come from treating soldiers in the field because they sustain very traumatic injuries. So we have learned a lot from what they have just come up with on the fly to help save their buddy who's bleeding out or has a broken leg and 1,000 miles from a hospital. Trauma treatments and surgeries are their big thing for that. I was an EMS for a little while, emergency medical services, and I can tell you personally, we had 2 devices I remember distinctly came directly from the military. One was a tourniquet, which was, a tourniquet's easy to make. You make it with a belt or whatever. But this thing was a Velcro tourniquet, and it had a strap that laid over with a stick that fit into the tourniquet itself.
Mm-hmm.
Once you Velcro the whole thing together, you twisted it with this little stick that was like impossible to break. We tried really hard. And it made a perfect tourniquet. Really, really stopped anything that I ever saw bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing was a traction sling. Now, most people aren't familiar with what that is, but if you break your femur, the only way to stop the pain, besides massive amounts of opioids, is to put traction, to pull the foot from the hip. So it realigns the bone.
Yeah.
And the pain goes away pretty quickly. Works really well if you're out, picking up someone who broke their femur on a motorcycle or something like that. You pick them up in the ambulance, and you don't have that much morphine on you, so you have to put their leg in traction. The problem with the traction sling in an ambulance is it sticks out of the back of the ambulance. It's so long. So the military came up with this thing. It's kind of like a tent, or like the tent poles that you've seen that fold together.
Yeah.
So you pull it out just as long as you need it. And
so it telescopes out.
Yeah, it telescopes. So you can strap at the hip and at the ankle, and that's as long as the whole thing is. But it works just as well as the traditional huge traction sling that we used to use.
So what's the recovery time for a typical broken femur, you would say?
Oh, it's a while. Well, it depends. I mean, if you do surgery, which most people do nowadays, most people don't do closed reductions where they just snap the bone into place. But if you do surgery and you get a plate installed, it's probably 3 or 4 weeks, I would imagine. Because the plate's what is holding the bone together. Now, they also did things with bullet wound dressings. I didn't get to see this because it came out as I was leaving EMS, but it's a really cool. There were a couple things. One was kind of like a cotton device that you shoved into the bullet hole wound. Probably didn't feel too good. But there was another one that was from a syringe. It was like this liquid glue stuff, and it stopped bleeding.
I've actually heard about that. And then they used it in the military as instant compression guard against acute hemorrhage.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It definitely does not fix everything, but it will keep you from dying until you can get it fixed.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
So did you know that Brad Pitt had played Dr. Fauci on an episode of SNL?
You mean the National Institute of Health, Dr. Fauci?
Yes.
Oh.
So a fun fact, they're both very important humanitarians. So Brad Pitt had once said, Let us be the ones who say we do not accept that a child dies every 3 seconds simply because he does not have the drugs you and I have. Let us be the ones to say we are not satisfied that your birthplace determines your right for life. Let us be outraged. Let us be loud. Let us be bold.
I respect Brad Pitt a little bit more now.
Now, the rapid growth of cities in the 1800s going onwards led to the necessity of public health regulations. Louis Pasteur started the ball rolling on antiseptic technique after his hypothesis of microorganisms was proven true. Of course, this process is now known as pasteurization. He's known as the father of bacteriology and microbiology. So a quick bit about pasteurization and how the process works. There is a brief heating to 100 degrees Celsius and then a cooling down in order to preserve the substance. Typically, what was pasteurized was milk. The hotter the pasteurization, the longer an item is typically kept. There's also a flash pasteurization called the ultra-high temperature, or UTH, where milk can be heated as high as 140 degrees Celsius for 2 to 3 seconds, and that's enough to preserve it.
That's interesting. Before this process, people drank a lot more alcohol. The reason is water was unclean to drink, so they brewed beer and they made wine, and they didn't realize that in the process of fermentation, you have to boil the liquid, the water off, right? And that's what actually killed everything and made what came out safe to drink. So if they'd realized a lot sooner that all they had to do was boil water, they would have had to drink so much alcohol. But there might be a reason that they didn't learn that sooner.
So those who drank beer survived longer.
Yeah, basically.
Until probably liver cirrhosis or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, Louis Pasteur was also the creator of the first vaccine, which was for rabies. And later on, he created the vaccine for cholera and anthrax as well.
Do you know the story of the rabies vaccine?
I do not.
It was a crazy story, and it's
as crazy as those infected with rabies.
Well, as crazy as most medical advances are.
Mm-hmm.
A boy was bitten by, I think it was a rabid dog. I'm not positive, but it was a rabid animal of some sort. And he convinced the parents. He said, "Look, your kid's going to die anyway. We know that, right? Every kid, everybody that's bitten by a rabid animal dies."
It's a hard thing to say to a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a parent, I totally understand that. But he said, "Let me try something. It shouldn't make anything worse because your kid is going to die. So let's try this, see what happens." He starts injecting the kid with some serum that he created that had the attenuated virus in it.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, the boy actually started getting better. And then, boom, now you have a vaccine where you use attenuated viruses to cause your body to create an immune response. And that's how the first vaccine was created.
Mm-hmm. And that's how the majority of vaccines have been created up until recently.
Ah, yes, the mRNA COVID vaccine.
Yes.
A lot of research, a lot of time spent in the lab. Did you know they've been using that for about 10 years for cancer research?
I did not.
Yeah, that's where the mRNA vaccine came from.
So how old are viruses when it comes to social interactions?
They're pretty old. The oldest ones we know of probably are from stories handed down or from historians, such as smallpox and measles. We've all heard of the settlers from Europe giving sick blankets or blankets that had been infected by the sick to the Native Americans.
The earliest accounts of biological warfare. Yeah.
Possibly, hopefully not completely intentional, I'm sure somewhere, but of course, Louis Pasteur and Edward Jenner created the first vaccines. HIV, it's lost a lot of media coverage lately, but it's still one of the most pathogenic viruses in our modern time. And it's interesting that it doesn't actually kill you. HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus. So what it does is attack your immune system and opens the door for anything else, a common cold at the end of the virus's life.
That your immunity otherwise would have been able to fight off.
Right. You're just so weakened that your body can't fight anymore. It's a really sad disease. And currently, we, of course, have the coronavirus that you and I just spoke about with the vaccine for that. But probably one of the all-time worst viruses. And this virus actually spawned several new vaccines. Sadly, in the 1950s, the early renditions of these vaccines killed a couple hundred kids. But so many kids were being infected by polio at the time that they decided it was worth the loss because, again, the kids were likely to die anyway. So 200 to 300 were kind of an acceptable loss. It's really sad to think about how debilitating this virus was.
Mm-hmm. And then the only treatment typically was something called the iron lung. And did you know that
I thought that was just a band name.
You mean the Iron Maiden?
Oh, that's it. That's right.
The iron lung is actually being used in America today. There are recorded 2 individuals that still use the iron lung. And one of those individuals, his name is Paul Alexander. He contracted polio in the 1950s at the age of 6. And he's been in an iron lung ever since then.
I can't imagine laying in one of those things for years and decades.
Paralyzed from the neck down, he had to fight constantly from a feeling of drowning every day in his own saliva, along with seeing other children in the hospital passing away in front of him. It's very, very sad. But the iron lung works by creating a temporary vacuum in the chamber that allows the expansion of the lungs. Otherwise, the lungs can't inflate due to a paralyzed diaphragm.
Right, that's normally, it's taking the place of the muscles that are now paralyzed.
Exactly.
That would be working otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So he can survive outside of the iron lung for up to 3 minutes without having to go back into it. And he was able to do it for a longer period of time when he was younger due to something called frog breaths, where he was able to swallow air using his tongue. And that was enough for him to live outside of the iron lung during his adolescence and then into his adult life.
Oh, so he was totally out of the iron lung for a little while?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Man, I bet that, oh, jeez. Horrible disease. Fortunately, we're past most of those now. And hopefully COVID will be gone sooner rather than later.
We hope so.
Now, when doctors start developing things like vaccines, that kind of makes you think of specialization. And in the hospitals in the early 1900s, that's when specialization really started taking effect. You weren't just a physician who treated whatever came your way. You started treating things like nowadays we have cancer specialists, ortho specialists for bone treatments, general surgeons, intensivists, you name it. There's probably a doctor that has studied his whole career to be an expert in this field. Now, because of hospitals and people staying in hospitals longer than they were in the past, nosocomial infections came about.
So what does nosocomial mean?
That means you acquire the infection from the hospital because either your immune system is decreased or someone else is fighting some kind of nasty bug that is not treatable easily with antibiotics.
Okay.
Speaking of antibiotics, they came around mainstream in the mid-1900s, around the 1940s and 50s. Huge advancement in surviving infection when you can actually fight off an infection with something other than just your own immune system.
And antibiotics were discovered originally by accident, right?
Well, kind of.
That's the story we were told in science class.
Well, depends on which antibiotic you're talking about. In the ancient times, there are records of using moldy bread, like putting that over an infected wound, which was technically the use of an antibiotic. But in the 1500s, John Parkinson, in the 1500s, this man lived almost 100 years. Mind-blowing.
Wow.
So he definitely was doing something right. But he also used molds to treat infections. He actually wrote this down as a physician that he was treating infections with molds, and it worked. Penicillin, probably the most recognized antibiotic anywhere, was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928. And that is it was one of the most used antibiotics, and now we've had several different generations past penicillin.
And now another leap forward in modern medicine is the inclusion of women in medicine. Medicine was a male-dominated sphere for thousands of years, and it was only up until the 1950s that women began working en masse as nurses, and then in the 1970s as physicians. So do you know why in the 1950s more women had gone into healthcare?
I would guess it has something to do with World War II.
Yeah. So because so many lives were lost, so many people were incapacitated, that the men weren't able to fulfill the roles as nurses. And so women stepped in and advanced the profession to where it is today.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, after being a nurse, they wanted to go on and be doctors.
Exactly.
Yeah. So why don't we get to what is, probably in our lifetime, one of the biggest topics that will continue to be a big topic in America, health insurance.
Being able to pay for all these procedures is difficult by any stretch of the imagination. Also, it's difficult when you don't have itemized billing. The majority of hospital bills would be a single amount, and you would get multiple bills from different sources and different departments. So you wouldn't know exactly what you're paying for or what you're getting. And a lot of it is very obscure, obtuse things in the line items. So with health insurance, it's defined as any means that can be used to offset the cost of healthcare. Now, Medicare, welfare programs, private insurance, and long or short-term disabilities are examples of healthcare coverage. Right. But since 2013, the number of uninsured Americans has been cut in half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The uninsured proportion was stable at 14 to 15% from 1990 to 2008. Then it rose to 18% in Q3 of 2013 before rapidly descending to 11% in 2015. So the proportion without insurance has stabilized around 9% now. The problem with being uninsured is that there's a 40% higher death rate for those who do not have health insurance.
Yeah, it's really sad. A lot of people don't do any kind of health care if they don't have health insurance.
But one system which is gathering a lot of attention is universal health care.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on the fence about that. You know, it would be great. It would be awesome. But you have to stop and look at the logistics. We recently took a trip to Ireland, and one of the tour guides there was telling us, yes, we have health care. We have universal health care. And in an emergency, you'll be treated. If you go to the doctor because you're sick, they'll treat you. But if you do something elective that is a major procedure like a knee surgery, that can take up to 2 to 3 years to schedule. So if it's not life-threatening...
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's a very long time.
So what's the average time to schedule for a knee replacement or something?
Oh, here in the U.S.,
yeah.
It's, I would say, like probably a month. I mean, you see your primary, you get referred to a specialist, and then boom, they want to make the money and cut on you. Mm-hmm. So it's incredible the difference, you know, just a couple months to 2 to 3 years for something that could be quite painful and uncomfortable to live with. But here in the U.S., 80% of all the dollars spent on healthcare are spent on chronic diseases. And actually, I think that's worldwide, the 80%. Some of which are easily or cheaply treated or even totally prevented in the first place.
So you think in the future we should spend more money on preventing these diseases from even causing issues versus treating the diseases after they've infected the population?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you can prevent it from the start, you prevent the person from going through the process and you save a lot of money. It makes a lot more sense to do it that way. And that's one thing the ACA did. We'll get to that in a bit, but that's one thing I agreed with the ACA. But a universal sweep of universal healthcare, I think, will back up the system for years, just like it has in all the countries that have universal healthcare. Sounds great on paper.
Mm-hmm. Logistically is a bit of a nightmare.
You have to do it delicately.
Yeah.
One of the big things that has changed or has gotten even more cumbersome now is paperwork, electronic charting. The systems between hospitals and the insurance companies don't communicate well. There's just so much paperwork that's redundant and excessive that we have to do, and that's mostly an American thing to avoid being sued for liability reasons. Did you know if you go to another country and do a like mission work, you don't have to chart?
Is that true?
There is no charting, yeah. Because there's no reason. Why do you need to keep track of it?
You would think that like they would try to keep track of these medical records.
Oh, I'm sure like at the end of the day, you put, you know, I gave this patient fentanyl, I gave this patient morphine, whatever. But as far as like the vital by vital sign, you don't write that down. Why would you? Why do you need to? Think about how much time that would save.
So ultimately, it'd be a good idea to have health care at all costs. Now, Paul Farmer, an American medical anthropologist and physician, had said, "I've been asked a lot for my view on American health care. Well, it would be a good idea," to quote Gandhi. Rising healthcare costs are normally solved by changing reimbursement models or incentives. Now, healthcare is historically covered at least in part by employers. The 1990s were the beginning of major issues with healthcare. insurance companies used exclusionary clauses and eligibility provisions to try to control costs during the early to mid-90s. Actually kind of worked, as the costs remained neutral and even declined in 1997. However, healthcare costs rose after 1997 as consumers felt they were being unfairly treated by the restrictions placed on their healthcare plans.
Right. That's when a lot of the companies were saying, oh, you got cancer? Sorry, we don't cover cancer.
It's now a pre-existing condition.
Right.
The reduction of these restrictions caused a spike in cost, obviously, which happened to coincide with an economic downturn in the early 2000s, causing nearly 5 million people to lose coverage from 1999 to 2003.
Right. The reaction from the companies was, oh, well, you want us to cover everything, you're going to pay for it. And then a lot of people just couldn't afford to pay the premiums. So this began a shift of responsibility to the consumer where there are a lot more insurance policies offered or types of insurance policies offered, and the consumer had to make an informed decision. They have to either pay a lot out of pocket for the health procedures and treatments, but the data shows that what might happen, and normally what does happen, is they'll become better consumers and the market will take care of itself. But the problem with that is it's difficult to present all of this data to all the consumers. So you can't really inform the consumer to give them the chance to become an educated consumer. And that leads into an even bigger increase in costs because the patients basically are so worried about how much they're going to have to pay out of pocket that they just stop going altogether. And therefore they stop having diseases prevented from happening, like diabetes and hypertension, things like that. They just stop getting advice from physicians.
And ultimately, when the disease gets so bad that they go into the ER, it overtaxes the healthcare system.
Right. Now, the patient is now also tasked with shopping for the best price for their care. That can often lead to fragmenting care. Instead of going to a primary physician and being referred to a specialist, you run into redundancies. You go to 2 or 3 primary physicians. You get double prescriptions because this doctor doesn't know that doctor already prescribed that medication, or you get interactions for medications because of the same reason. And this can amazingly, or actually easily, raise healthcare costs.
Dennis Kucinich, representative from Ohio, had said everyone should have health insurance. I say everyone should have health care. I'm not selling insurance. I'd like to talk about the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare.
Very controversial piece of legislation there, my friend.
But it's offered health care for a vast majority of U.S. citizens.
A very true statement.
Enacted in March of 2010, it was designed to extend health care to millions of uninsured or underinsured individuals. It outlawed denial by insurance companies for pre-existing conditions, and it standardized essential benefits, including, but not limited to, ambulatory patient services, breastfeeding, emergency services, family planning, hospitalization, lab services, mental health and substance use disorder services, pregnancy, maternity and newborn care, prescriptions, preventative and wellness services, pediatrics, and rehabilitative and habilitative services.
Yeah, I don't think anybody on any side of any political argument can argue that these were definitely benefits of the ACA, to outlaw pre-existing conditions and to say, hey, you know what? These services that you just listed, those should be pretty much standard for everybody and basically free with an insurance.
Mm-hmm. Now, the ACA required insurance companies to provide essential preventative service at no cost. It extended Medicare coverage, varies by state, and required that all citizens have health insurance by tax penalty. So that form that we get every year now, do we have health insurance coverage throughout the entire year? That's in part due to this ACA.
But that was repealed by Trump. We'll get to that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these things we just mentioned are kind of the more controversial and debatable parts, I think, requiring health insurance by tax penalty. But, I don't know. What do you think about that?
So I think that lower income families shouldn't be penalized for not being able to afford health care.
Right. Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
I don't think anybody should be penalized. If you don't have health insurance, that's your choice. Now, if it puts a burden on the system, you can enact some legislation for a universal health care or like extreme benefits or major catastrophes, or do preventative health care. But I don't think taxing everyone is the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my favorite all-time broadcast journalists, Walter Cronkite, he said, America's healthcare system is neither healthy, caring, nor a system. I think he pretty much had it right. Now, Trump, when he took office, and I know this will be a controversial issue again, but Trump said he was going to repeal and replace the ACA. He, in part, did. He took away the tax through an executive order. He delayed, on January 20th, 2017, he delayed the implementation of any provision or requirement of the act that would impose a fiscal burden on any state. So that kind of retracted some of the Medicare, Medicaid expansions. Not sure about that one, but it's what happened. He also cut the enrollment period for the ACA online in half, from I think 6 months to 3 months. And then all of those provisions caused 3.5 million people to come off the Affordable Care Act. The tax penalty was dropped, like I said, and in November of 2020, before the Supreme Court, 21 attorney generals helped defund the ACA.
I heard that Biden may introduce the ACA again, and January 28th, he did sign an executive order that will focus on rules and other policies that limit Americans' access to health care. So we'll have to figure out how that develops.
Yeah, I think each side wants it in the best interest of the citizens, or at least I hope they do. But like we've said before, this has to be handled delicately. You can't do one sweeping bill to take care of this. But I think Mahatma Gandhi said it best when he said, "It is health that is real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver."
Wow, that was exciting. Is this what you guys do all the time?
Yeah, when we're not maintaining the cryo systems for various ships.
I think the coast is clear. Sounds like they've left for their favorite snack.
And what would that be?
Pizza, of course. There's an automatic pizza maker on board that runs off a separate power system from the ship. I've used the pizza oven to keep warm during the days.
And the pizza oven doesn't bother them?
Oh, it's closed during this time of the day. The pizzas are pretty much frozen at this point. After the remaining crew and passengers were consumed or converted, all that was left was frozen pizza.
More incentive for us to leave.
Don't worry, they're notoriously slow. We'll be okay.
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. Run!
Bienvenue à bord.
Sorry, comms must have spliced into the ship's language system.
We've been hit. Gyroscopic stabilizers are not stabilizing gyroscopically.
Losing power to the main engines, too. What was that? Space junk?
Scanning now.
Looks like another ship. They're tailing us.
Pirates?
Worse, corporate. Someone else from Cryo Corp is trying to shoot us down.
Rerouting power to the main engine. Shifting to manual mode. Miss Port, there's an extra seat over there. Buckle up. Evasive maneuvers now.
Gyro now stable, but you've sustained a pressure leak to the auxiliary oxygen line.
You fixed the gyro already?
Just a recalibration of the axial ringlets.
Nice work.
We can't stay out in space for much longer. There's a planet below us.
Looks like it's a failed colonist site in the charts, but should still be habitable.
I wouldn't recommend it. We don't have any landing gear.
If that's our only shot, let's do it. Everyone brace for atmospheric entry.
We're at Aurelia?
You know this place?
Yes, Wait, what's going on?
I guess it's an automatic capsule sealing. We'll get you out of there.
No need. These old ships still have escape pods. Mine must have been triggered.
Miss Port, we'll find you on the surface.
Make sure to stay alive, gentlemen. This whole rescue thing is going so well.
Matt, did you know that there was an escape pod on the ship?
I did not know.
Well, I'm sure it was listed in
I
the
swear to Scorpio,
pamphlet.
if you say something's wrong. The landing gear isn't functioning.
Does anyone listen to me?
I may have sold it to pay for the voyage.
You sold the landing gear?
Well, we came up short on the rest of the funds, and we never land on planets.
Well, brace for impact.
20 000 mètres, 15 000 mètres, 10 000 mètres, 5 000 mètres, 2 000 mètres.
And that's our show. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we exist within the universe.
And the universe exists within ourselves. We're all the stuff of stars.
So have a stellar day, everyone. And thanks for stopping by our corner of the cosmos.
This has been the MidFlight Crisis podcast. You can support important spaceship repairs and maintenance by subscribing to the MidFlight Crisis Patreon page. We'd love to hear your suggestions about the show and future topics, and we appreciate your support, ratings, and reviews. This endeavor isn't possible without amazing listeners like you. Thanks for sharing your space and time with us. We'll see you on our next adventure. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a line at intrepidtransfer@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.